Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar as we kick off our new series, our season. And our mission on this season is to dive into the wonderful world of labor market and really try and get beneath the complexity that exists so that we can make insight usable and useful. And so in this series, we'll be spending some time really thinking about how to categorize and structure information to make it such. So very excited to kick this series off. And as ever, very pleased to be joined by our head of global research, Eleanor Magrini, as we work through today's topic. Hi, Eleanor, how are you?
Hello, Andy. Good to be here again.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So before we get into the clever stuff, and that's why we have Eleanor here, let's just quickly orient you. So if you are indeed new to Lightcast, welcome. You're very welcome, and thanks for joining us. Just a little bit of background. We are a labor market data company, and our mission really is about focused on helping to understand what's happening in the world of work so that we can enable you and your stakeholders to really unlock the great opportunities that the evolution in the world of work is bringing, and also mitigate some of those great challenges. We do this through pulling together unrivaled and unparalleled labor market intelligence and data that really helps us to understand labor demand as well as labor supply, synthesizing official government statistics that really help us understand the structural building blocks to local, national economies, and supplementing that with our proprietary big data sets, job postings derived data that helps us really understand what employers are seeking in the labor market as they seek to recruit talent, but also look at professional profiles as people describe themselves in the labor market as a contextual view of labor supply and availability as well. And we do that through the wonders of data structure and taxonomies, which we're going to dive into shortly. But ultimately, that data is only as valuable as the ability for you guys to use that and bring that to your questions and challenges and opportunities. And so we have a range of solutions, ranging from our software tools that allow you to access that information and query that information, through to actually data integrations where that information and intelligence can be integrated into your internal or even external infrastructure. And of course, our amazing economists, of which Eleanor is one of our great club of economists, who help us address specific questions that your organization might have. So that's why we are talking about what we are talking about today, because this is the meat and drink and the why behind why we do a lot of these things in the labor market. And as we come on to thinking about this topic, I just want to orient you. So we kick off today with this webinar. This is something that we make available to all, but very excited about our customer only services that'll follow on from this. So we have a special training session coming up shortly for customers who have access to that information and want to dig even deeper than Eleanor and I will get to today. And then as we break off into our different sectors that we serve, in the education space, in the government space, we have a series of innovation sessions that we are running over the course of the next month or so, diving into kind of today's topic and think about how we bring this into the world that we are focusing on in education, further and higher education, as well as regional government and professional body organizations there. So those innovation groups are a great way of sharing customer case studies, stories, and exemplars that are more sector specific. And then we bring this all to a close through July with a very special roundtable, bringing together some customers in a given region who are undertaking some very exciting collaboration. And we're thinking about the role in which data and common language of data is really helping us to kind of enable people with different needs and different opportunities in the labor market to come together around a common local theme. there. So a range of activities coming up over the coming months, which we will showcase and advertise to, and very excited for you all to dive into that as we go. So on to today's topic, and it really sort of follows on from where we left off last time. So this next series we thought would be helpful to really dive into some of the sort of building blocks, I suppose, of labour market intelligence. You may have heard the phrase taxonomy. We use it a lot. It's a fairly standard term in our world, but really what this is describing is how do we structure information, particularly from disparate sources, that allows us to really make sense of labour market activity and bring that to real life scenarios. So we're going to specifically dive into our new Lightcast occupation taxonomy update, but we also will reference things like the skills taxonomy that we work with regularly, that allows us to really bring some sense to a lot of the noise that we're hearing in the labour market, and think about why this is not just helpful in data structure, but what does that mean for actually executing around some really quite interesting and exciting times when it comes to policy reform in the economic development, economic investment, and skills investment space as we go through. So, our goal today really is to sort of bring that structure so we can help you better understand the realities of why data is as such, but bring it to life and bring some examples forward that can help us think through its application for real world activity that you're probably facing right here, right now, and hearing a lot about. And let me frame that just a little more by talking about, I think, one of those sort of anchor points that is particularly relevant in our world right now here in the UK, which is the new industrial strategy, Invest 2035, the UK's modern industrial strategy. So this is working through consultation and evolutionary process, but the government has in effect looked at the UK economy, looked at the global economy, it's some of the kind of key core trends, and pondered, well, where do we need to be as a country? Where do we need to focus? What helps us to win in a fast-moving, ever-changing global economy? And how do we position the UK and UK citizens and UK businesses to be strongly connected into the global trends and opportunities? How do we play to local strengths that we have, not just here in the UK, but within different segments of our economy? And so this industrial strategy, and there's a link there, and I'm sure you if you haven't seen it, I'd certainly recommend popping over and having a little look. But headlines really are that there are kind of 8 key sectors that I think the government is really rallying around in terms of investment and development. Those include advanced manufacturing, creative industries, the green agenda, defense, which has obviously been a topic that's been rising up the agenda more recently, digital and technology, financial services, life sciences, and professional and business services. So these are sort of key framing components to where investment and focus lie. And that makes a lot of sense, as we think of it in these terms, in terms of where we're well placed or where we know the world is going towards. But I think actually frames really nicely the sort of the why do we need taxonomies? What role do taxonomies play in all of this, and why do we need it? And that's where we need clever people like Eleanor to help explain as we work through. So I'm going to, I suppose, pose that question to you, Eleanor. What does a taxonomy have to do with this? And as we go through, and I think the exciting thing is we're actually going to share a few little examples, aren't we, and real cases in our data that are kind of corralled around some of these topics. So welcome back, Eleanor. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, let me pose I'll pose the question. Interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I'm going to start on this slide actually before I move on to the more technical slides. So, as Andy said, that the strategy is focused on 8 sectors, And if you've been working around the labor market space for quite some time, like we do, you look at this list of sectors and immediately try to think, okay, but what does advanced manufacturing means? Or what does clean energy mean? How do we define these topics? How do we track them? Because the government obviously has identified these priorities, and there are a number of things that they need to know about these priorities in terms of what type of investments these sectors need, what type of countries are we competing against, where do we want to aim to be the leader in the world, or how do we train people so they can enter these sectors and businesses actually have access to the skills they need. All these type of questions, when it comes to sector like this, are not very clear cut to answer, in the sense that a lot of these sectors don't nicely fit with nice classifications that the Office for National Statistics has. So if you spend a lot of time in this space, you would hear about SIC, you would hear about SOC. These are the standard official classification for occupations and industries. But in reality, because the labor market is changing so fast, these taxonomies that are official and are really important to structure official data sometimes cannot keep pace with the changes or the policy priorities. And so we end up with sectors like this that would look a bit like a monster when we try to analyze them with the official statistics, because there is no perfect way to use these taxonomies to define them. So that's where the taxonomies that we talk about and the topic of today is all about how we can simplify these topics and talk about labor market in more simple terms. I mentioned SIC and SOC. So if you're familiar with these classifications, they are actually taxonomies. So they are ways to classify information about occupation and about industries in a hierarchical way that goes from the macro view, big categories, like we can have the 9 top categories in the occupation classification, or the industries like agriculture, manufacturing, construction. And then they go into more specific details. So rather than having manufacturing, we have different parts of manufacturing, going more and more details as we go through the taxonomy. The Lightcast occupation taxonomy, it's another type of a taxonomy. And the importance of using both official or proprietary taxonomies is that all these all these taxonomies, what they do is try to make sense of a big, messy, difficult labor market to navigate, where there is a lot of data that doesn't often speak the same language. We have different data sets that track different things or talk about different parts of the labor markets. And so what the taxonomies really enable us to do is to make sense and create clarity around all these different type of information, so that we can simplify key labor market concept, but also we can get all the key stakeholders together to speak the same language. Another example in this case is like when we think about further education colleges, they think about sector subject areas. That's their main areas of expertise. Policy space talks about sectors in a different way. Taxonomies help us find a way to define all this topic in one common language that we can use to then transform and bring the data to life and to action. And this is where I want to spend a second to introduce the Lightcast occupation taxonomy and the Lightcast skills taxonomies, which are both proprietary taxonomies that we've built at Lightcast to go further compared to the official taxonomies that I just mentioned from the Office for National Statistics. These two taxonomies have 3 elements that we don't yet see in official statistics, but that are really important when it comes to trying to understand and navigate labor market complexity in a period of rapid change. The first element of these taxonomies is that they are global. And this means that we can use this framework to analyze occupation and skills, not just in the UK, but right across the world. So we can compare what we find in the UK with what we find in the US, in Europe, in Asia. And this is really important because if we want to compare apple to apples, what's happening in different countries, we need to have a common understanding, a common language to track these changes right across the labor market. The second element is Granular. And here is where I normally use a couple of examples, and we're going to go into more of them into today's report. But official statistics are very rich, but up to a certain point. If we think about the Office for National Statistics SOC, we have approximately 400 occupations that are classified, but we have thousands and thousands of job titles that companies are using, and so we need to strike a balance in between the way too granular information that businesses have about job titles, but also the not enough granularity that we have in these official taxonomies. And the Lightcast occupation taxonomy sits somewhere in the middle, in the sense that it provides a granular understanding of the labor market, but normalizing some of the differences that we see between employers. Because when a business is looking for a data analyst or an analyst brackets data, that's the same type of job. We need to capture it all in one bucket. But that needs to be separate from other business analytics job, for example, or other data science job. And then lastly, responsive. The challenge at the moment is that the labor market is changing really fast. So changes that before would take a decade to happen now happen within 1 or 2 years. And the issue is that official taxonomies are updated every 10 years. And so what happens there is that we are using a framework of the world. We are using some glasses that are not actually showing us the latest picture of the labor market. They are using something that was true 10 years ago, but they may not necessarily be a true reflection of what we're seeing right now. And therefore, the Lightcast occupation taxonomy, as well as the skills taxonomy, add value in there because they help us identify emerging trends as soon as they appear, because we update them regularly. So these are the key three topics that we want to explore a little bit more today. But as Andy said, I can talk about taxonomies for a long time, but the real value is actually in linking this back to the type of questions and challenges that you may be facing right now in your work trying to navigate labor market complexity. So we're going to take it one by one and use some case studies from the list that Andy shared at the beginning to just go into the details.
Well, just before we jump into that, because I think it can be a challenging topic and feel quite technical, but I think what we're trying to do is debunk some of that. But the whole point is, and hence the titles you've seen on the slides throughout, the labor market is an incredibly complicated place that is becoming ever more complicated at a greater pace of change. And so I think this is setting us as a data company a fantastic challenge. And it's a challenge that will never be solved. It will always we'll have to keep evolving and developing. And that's the point of what you're describing. As the world becomes ever more globally integrated, the ability to look across geographies with consistency is so critical. As we absolutely move particularly into a more granular world where it's skills-based hiring and activity is now becoming the standard to navigate that complexity. Again, our ability to view and understand the labor market needs to act on that level. And as you describe, the just sheer pace of change means we've got to keep up as best we can with those emergent trends. And so so that's why we've invested and why we care about taxonomies here at Lightcast, is to enable a lot of that, and not to necessarily replace what's already there, but to extend and develop it in ways that are just not possible to do with the infrastructure and how things work through through the standard kind of official statistics mechanisms. And that's even where there are official statistics. Obviously, we're blessed here in the UK to have such a great infrastructure. But even then, we hear in the news recently about sort of challenges to the ONS methodologies and accuracy of data. and so on and so forth. But you go into other regions of the world where that is not so available as a starting point. There are definitely gaps to fill as well, and so that's comes back to our mission here at Lightcast as we work through. But the point is to connect to my opening statement around, say, the industrial strategy. Those eight themes, we sort of all know what they mean, but actually looking for it in the data and actually really defining them well, where everyone will have a slightly different view of what they think clean technologies might be, or advanced manufacturing might be. It's really important, particularly when we're working across multiple stakeholders in education, business and industry, as well as government and policymakers, to have that common language, to have that common understanding and that common definition as well. And so that's why it's important not just to have taxonomies, but to use them as much as the insights and the analytics that come through, to make sure we are comparing apples with apples and speaking the same language as we go. So that's the boring bit over. Let's get into the interesting stuff, because I think what we've worked on and you've worked on is really starting to think about some of these themes within the context of of some of those sort of headlines from the industrial strategy, to start to really lift the lid and get into the so what of what do we mean by some of these things. And so you're going to take us through, as you say, a few different use cases, thinking about the way that taxonomies enable those use cases, and then show a few examples.
Yes, so let's start with comparing apple to apples. So let's go into the details of global. You may come across from your work two questions related to how's the UK comparing to such and such countries when it comes to this sector. For example, we have actually done some work on that recently on the life sciences sector. So we were working with an organization on the life sciences sector in the UK, and I wanted to understand how that compared in terms of number of jobs and recruitment activities in different parts of the world. So having a global taxonomy that applies to different markets help answer question around international benchmarking and comparison. So from a policy making perspective, it allows to understand how the country compares to other countries in terms of that sector. It's
Yeah,
not
and
just some.
on that point, Ellen, I think that's really important, because it's easy to think when we're here in the UK, yes, it's a UK industrial strategy, surely then it's the government that should care about what's happening out in the world. But actually, many of our customers and users of Lightcast data operate internationally as well. And actually, we know from our own experience that we look at the UK industrial strategy and we can see some very common themes to what we're seeing across Europe and in Australia and in the US in terms of priority sectors, because they're largely globally driven activities. And so knowing our place is important to some viewers, perhaps because they operate internationally, or for others it might give them as some clues as to what's happening in other areas that we can bring good practice into the UK as well. So I think that's a really important one.
Yeah, and it's not just for international benchmarking, it's also for recruitment strategies. And with recruitment strategies here, I mean, both in terms of if you're a business and you want to understand where you need to find the talent, but also in terms of if you're a university and you want to market your programs. So you need to understand where demand for your for occupations related to your program is across the world. And also, it really helps in terms of understanding and addressing talent shortages at the global level. We talked about before global labor markets. I mean, there is a UK labor market, but it's not. The UK is an island, but the UK labor market is not an island. It's not isolated from other labor markets right across the world. And so, understanding how these trends are happening globally is really important.
Well, and that's a pertinent one with recent announcements on UK migration
Yeah.
strategy and policy. Obviously, very timely in terms of the UK EU reset, and certainly movement of young people under revised visa schemes, etc. So we are, constantly connected in? Is that about bringing in the top talent? That's what we seek. We hear our policymakers say that we want to bring in the top talent. So where is that top talent? But also, as you say, how can we fill some of those holes? But doing it within all of the context of other policies and restrictions and strategies as well.
And I think on that point, Andy, it's a nice segue for to the last point, which is around location strategies, because and to the case studies that I'm going to show you in a moment. Because if you think about, for example, manufacturing, which is at top of the discussion at the moment because of a lot of the changes that the Trump administration is bringing in the US. A lot of companies in the US may be looking at other places across the world where to do business, or the other way around. Different parts of the world will try to understand how to do business with the US in different ways, or how to do different business between themselves in different ways. And so having the ability to compare all different markets can help select a location for new businesses, or for new headquarters, or for new offices. And these are some of the things that we were thinking about when we built this case study, which is indeed around demand for R&D, R&D in advanced manufacturing. And so here, first, we try to use our taxonomy to define advanced manufacturing as as a group of activities that are related to manufacturing, but they are particularly related to R&D within the sector. So we are trying to look at the higher end in terms of research and innovation and development in types of jobs. And so we identified a list of R&D related occupation. And what we did was we tried to look at demand for this occupation in different countries using our job postings data. So what you see here is the share of job postings in each country represented by R&D occupations in advanced manufacturing. And the value of having this type of data is that it helps you identify in which countries these type of jobs play the bigger role, and how this is evolving over time. And here you see it on a comparative basis, so how much of the labor market in each country is represented by this type of jobs. But you could also see it by volume, so where is the largest number of job postings? So where is recruitment activity currently highest when it comes to R&D manufacturing across the world? And similarly related to that, goes to the second point. So here we look at the trend over time. So how's the sector performing in the different countries? Here is that is a snapshot of at one point in time, 2024, on which are the hotspots for recruitment activity in R&D in advanced manufacturing. And it helps us understand the relative strengths of different places and of different countries. So for example, when it actually comes to the top 20, 19 of the hotspots for advanced manufacturing are all in the US. So no wonder why the politics around it, around the whole thing are playing out right now. But
Yeah.
there are other hotspots also in other parts of the world.
So I was going to say, I mean, why is this important? Why is this interesting within the framing of the industrial strategy? And of course, you know, advanced manufacturing is one of those 8 key areas where the UK has said, hey, we're going to double down on this because this will help our UK PLC, our economy. And of course, R&D, the segment of it, is a critical part of driving the innovation that will create the need for the manufacturing to execute as well. So, the interesting question is, do we need to invest more in research and development and innovation to nurture that economy? And what can we learn clearly from places like the US and other hotspots? Ireland was interesting to see on that slide. What are they doing? What is the environment that they've created, the incentive structure, the skills base that are driving that, to say if we wanted to replicate that here in the UK, what can we learn from how others are clearly doing it better? So that we can start to preempt that and shape that and drive that here in the UK. So, yeah, the challenge is, what do we mean by advanced manufacturing? We need to define that, and then thinking about what is the driver to advanced manufacturing. Well, that's innovation. So let's really look specifically at particular R&D type roles that will enable us to kind of know what we're looking for and then dig deeper from there.
Yeah, perfect on dig deeper, because that's the next point. Here we get the overview of which are the hotspots, but obviously when then you dig deeper into specific roles within R&D in advanced manufacturing, the answer can be different. So depending on what you're looking for within the specific sector, you might need to look in different places. And so the other thing, and by the way, all of this will be available on our website. So here is a lot of screenshots. It gets way more interesting when you play with it, and you can actually choose and pick as you see fit. But what you can do is actually zoom in on specific roles, like we do here with chemical operators, and you can actually identify in which countries actually these type of roles are currently most in demand. And here you see chemical operators, but change the name of the occupation, and you will get a different type of structure of the labor market. So it's important to have the macro picture, but then also go into the details. Going on to continuing on the granular view, let's pause for a moment as to why this would be helpful and in what scenarios does it help to have a granular view. I think when it comes to the policies at the high level that the government is putting forward, actually having the big picture is really important. Granular, it's that middle ground that we need to strike more when we try to turn something from the general to the practicalities of it. So, for example, if you've identified that the advanced manufacturing sector overall needs investment, then the next step is understanding what bits of advanced manufacturing actually need investment. So when you're taking the investment allocation decision, when you're trying to do policy reforms, it's good to have the sector, but then you need to know the details within the sector to actually make the policies most effective. And similarly, if you are in education, you need to know whether advanced manufacturing is growing compared to the clean energy sector or something else. But actually, what you need even more is going to the level of detail that goes, what are we going to do about it? What type of jobs do we need? And what kind of skills are these jobs do these jobs require? And similarly, if you work in HR, so if you work in a company, you need to understand how to structure your workforce. And again, you need to go into this level of detail to understand your workforce planning and your recruitment strategy, because you don't just want to recruit for R&D in advanced manufacturing. You want to recruit for the specific roles. And so here we use the example of cyber to bring it home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the key there is, what we saw in the first instance was, where do we look for clues? Where can we look for clues to focus our attention to a more granular view, to move it into a so what place, as you described? So how do we turn, oh, that's interesting to see Canada and chemical operatives, but it doesn't end there. It poses the next question. So what can we learn about chemical operatives in Canada that might give us the clues as to the skill strategy we need in the UK, upon which to build those skills and capabilities in our workforce, or enable employers to recruit the right and seek the right types of skills to bring into their business to unlock that. So it really is started bridging the interesting intel into something more practical and action oriented, and how do we execute it? So yeah, cyber is a great one. Again, we hear so much, and obviously it's very timely, a lot of that in the news in the UK right now, with retail being actively targeted and challenged, and we know that's an area we need to continue to strengthen as a country in terms of those capabilities, right from government level down to individual companies and individual organizations, and executing. There's a big skills demand in there. But what do we mean, by cybersecurity? That's the big question.
Yeah, that's a big question. And if you ask official statistics, cyber is a big black hole. It's just a big box, and it's called cyber. There are cyber security professionals, something like that is called in official statistics. And that is not very helpful when you're trying to do something about cyber, because as we were just talking about, you need to know the details about what's within cyber. And that's where, for example, our taxonomy can really help, because we break down within taxonomy a number of, and I'm not gonna I think it's more than 10, less than 20. I'm not going to try to guess the exact number here, but we have a bunch of occupations related to cyber that we can identify and split. So we have the cybercrime analyst and investigator, for example, that accounts for the largest number of jobs within cyber. There are the cybersecurity analyst. But beyond these two big chunks of cybersecurity roles, there are a whole bunch of other different roles like cybersecurity architects, consultant, engineers, managers, auditors. They're all related to cybersecurity, but they all play different roles. And because they play different roles within the cybersecurity space, they need different skills. And so it's really important to understand the different nuances between each of them. And that's where not only our occupation taxonomy is important, but that's where the power is in using this in combination with our skills taxonomy. And again, to give you an example, if we look at the skills that are most in demand in cybersecurity roles, in the countries that we were looking at earlier, so 10 countries across the world, we see that many of the skills they require are related to information technology, but they also require skills related to public safety, where we're talking about cybersecurity, business, and law and regulation and compliance. And so we can see the big picture, so the type of topics, the macro areas, and then we can zoom in into the details of the specific skills. And just to bring it home, this last slide, again, on the website, you can actually pick your occupation, but this brings it home by combining the occupation with the specific skills that are required in that occupation to give a clear picture of what it means in practice to be a cybercrime analyst or investigators in this case, and the type of skills that are required, which can then be used for curriculum planning for roles related to for courses related to cybersecurity, can be used for L&D for a company perspective if they want to do it in-house, or it can be used for recruiting. So you can recruit for a cybercrime analyst, and you can be looking for all these type of skills in the people that you are trying to target. And then let me move on to responsive, which is the last of the three key topics that we wanted to discuss today. And here, responsive is really about the ability of, as we said before, capturing labor market trends as soon as they emerge. And this really helps because it normally takes a while for these trends to appear in official statistics. And here, this is really important, again, when we have a labor market that is changing fast, and especially case in point right now, artificial intelligence, being able to capture this trend and seeing how it is evolving over time, it is really important. It's not just about monitoring though these new trends, it's also ensuring that we do something with this monitoring, which on the education front is about ensuring that curriculum and programs are aligned to the latest trends that we're seeing in the labor market. And also from a company perspective, you want to know the emerging trend because you want to be the one driving the emerging trend. You don't want to be the one behind. So you want to stay on top of all this information. And here, again, we use one of the sectors from the industrial strategy as an example. And this example is clean energy. Now, clean energy and green is another area that is going through a lot of reform, discussion, debates right now, but it's also a really important one in terms of the transition to a green economy. And again, the first challenge here is to how do we define clean energy? And again, the first step that we take is with our taxonomy is to try and understand the perimeters by identifying a list of occupations that are related to clean energy. And by doing so, then we can track the evolution of demand for these roles over time. And as we can see, for most of them across the countries that we've been looking at, then there has been a peak in 2023, and then the number of jobs has then declined in number of job postings. And then it's not just about seeing the trend over time, but it is also about understanding who is recruiting for these roles. So if I want to know and stay ahead of the competition, I want to see who is my competition. And these are, for example, the companies that in 2024 have had the largest number of job postings requiring looking for not clean energy jobs, and in particular energy specialists within the sector. And the line that we see underneath is the total number of job postings for energy specialists and how this has evolved over time. So here we see an increase in demand. And then lastly, again, going to the point that we were saying before, now that we have this type of information, then the next step is okay, what are the skills that are needed in these roles? And here again, you see the fastest growing common skills for the roles related to clean energy. You can toggle on the website and see the specialized skills, but the point is again to make informed decision about the type of skills training that is needed for meeting the demand of the clean energy sector going forward.
And I think the important thing about the the kind of frequency of update, etc., is really driven by the granularity. The more precise and focused you are in looking at the labor market, the more things are changing at a greater pace. And so when we think about our different taxonomies, it's our skill taxonomy. So over 30,000 unique skill terms that we're tracking in the labor market. That is where we are making our greatest sort of most rapid changes as we continue to identify either directly in our data or through our community using the data, making requests. We're updating that and refreshing that every month. So every month we're adding in a few more skills, maybe dropping off a few that then are disappearing in terms of skill demand, and keeping that fresh and regularly updated. Our Lightcast occupation taxonomy, not so granular as the 30,000 skills, just under 2,000 occupations. Well, that's something that we're looking at typically on about an annual cycle, maybe slightly less or more, depending on kind of frequency of change. But you take that back up to official statistics, and certainly here in the UK, SIC and SOC, well, they tend to be on a 10-year cycle. Some of that's down to the fact that they are so aggregated up. Not a lot of change quite happens at that same level. The change happens within those groupings. Some of that is also down to the sort of sheer cost and effort involved in maintaining such a big data infrastructure across multiple official sources as well. So that's why, these things go nicely hand in hand. And I think, as you dive into the granularity benefit, that then obviously kind of motivates the need to keep that current and fresh and up to date as well, in a way that historically less granular ways of defining and looking at the data have needed. And so that's why these things all make sense and connect together. And all of that, as we think about it, is driven by the world around us and just the sheer pace of change that we're seeing in that, which we obviously talked about in our last series, till the cows came home, actually. So that was good fun.
Yes, I think I'll hand it over to you to bring it even more to life now.
Sure, yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you, and just some really good examples of looking at whether you realize it or not when you hear those case studies. It's taxonomies at the heart of this that is enabling the ability to look consistently across the world, the ability to dig into the so what and start to get to that level of granularity that really does enable us to kind of start to move from, oh, that's interesting, to, oh, here's what we can do about it in our world, and ultimately rely on the ability to keep up to date, as up to date as possible, to keep on track of particularly these emergent elements of the labor market that are driving so much focus and interest right now there. Because it's only when we've got that level of insight and intelligence can we actually do something about it proactively, as opposed to reacting when often it's too late, or we have a problem to solve and it's a very different aspect. So really all of this is about proactivity. It's about embracing the opportunity and the change, and mitigating the risk and the challenge of the negative consequences of change, so that we can enable our stakeholders, whether they be citizens in our community, whether they be students or prospective students, whether that be our workforce, to really navigate our way through that. And it's thanks to the wonderful world of taxonomies, whether you realize it or not, that this is just possible, and intelligence like this is useful. So thank you, Eleanor, for talking us through that. And as we think about our world, particularly around some of the big agendas that we're facing in the UK, yeah, that industrial strategy really is trying to drive economic change, play to the strengths that we have, but also hook onto those global trends. But to be able to execute on that, we really need to understand our place in the world, the capabilities we already have, and the gaps we need to fill as we go forward. And that, of course, feeds directly into the skills reforms. So the Skills England activity, specifically in England, but obviously wider investment in skills across the United Kingdom. That is really then needing to use that same language and that level of granularity to enable us to work out how we proactively help talent align to demand and align to those strategies, so that we may have an aspiration to unlock advanced manufacturing, but quite frankly, if we don't have those R&D skills and capabilities within our workforce, we're going to struggle to maximize that opportunity and investment coming down the line. So let's make sure skills and workforce strategy is aligned to industrial strategy, and place is so critical as well. So the devolution agenda that also is at play here really is the convener of industry, of workforce, of skills reform. And so also wrapping that up in the ability to localize those trends, to bring those key stakeholders across education, government, professional bodies and sector organizations, as well as obviously key employers and workforce activity around a common language, so that we can play to the strengths of our place, leverage the investment and reforms that are coming down, and help places thrive. So hopefully something for everyone who's joining us today, in terms of just a few little examples to highlight. But as we were talking about earlier, the goal here is to really enable you as agents of change to leverage the capabilities that we've built, and the structures that we've built, so you can take our intelligence into real decision making there. If you want to learn more, and who wouldn't want to learn more, then a couple of resources to point you towards. So we have an amazing set of resources on the Lightcast website. So if you head to the taxonomies area, you can dive into the wonderful world of the Lightcast occupational taxonomy, the skills structure. A lot of resources you can play with it, learn about it there. And we actually recently produced an ebook that sort of bring some of that to life as well, and I would highly recommend checking that out as well. I'm sure there'll be links in the follow-up to this webinar. And as Eleanor alluded to, those case study examples that we work through are actually coming to on our website for you to access, so you can dig in a little bit more. So we picked out just a few areas, as you've seen, of what's driving labour market focus right now, and head to the Simplifying Labour Market Complexity resource page on our website, so you can dive in more and follow what Ellen was doing, and look at a whole lot more there as well. So absolutely encourage you to dive into all of that. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Of course, if you've got any questions, you want to learn more, certainly if you're a customer, feel free to reach out to your account managers, and keep an eye out for those innovation groups and training sessions where we will go into a lot more detail about how you can access all of these resources, how you can access the taxonomies and understand where to find them in your analyst subscription or other solutions there. Definitely encourage you, if you spend a lot of time working with the wonders of SIC and SOC codes in your Lightcast data, I'd encourage you to think about how you unlock the skills and the Lightcast occupational taxonomy to really help us help you dive a little bit more deeply into that granular benefit, and the more up to date and more more relevant, I suppose, to the real world elements that hook back still to SIC and SOC as you go. So thank you very much for joining us. Any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, till next time, we'll see you soon.